using your uploaded script brief as the source. The check was folded behind a photograph of my mother, standing in front of our old yellow house, smiling like she had not been dying, and when I opened it under the buzzing light of that storage office, I saw my name printed on a line worth more money than I had ever held in my life. $900. That was what I had paid for the storage unit. Not because I wanted antiques, furniture, or forgotten jewelry. I bought it because the auction listing showed one plastic bin full of old family photographs, and there was one picture on top I recognized immediately. My father's truck, my mother's porch swing, the red scarf she wore every Thanksgiving. But tucked inside that bin was a cashier's check made out to me for $412,000. The date was 11 years old. The bank was still open, and the signature authorizing it belonged to my brother-in-law, a man who had looked me in the eye at my mother's funeral and told me there was nothing left. I sat there for a long time. The auction clerk asked if I was all right. I told her I was, but I wasn't, because 3 questions had already opened in my mind, like doors in a hallway. Why had my mother left me a check I never received? Why had my family hidden it in a storage unit under another name? And why, 11 years later, had that unit suddenly been abandoned, right when I finally had enough peace in my life to stop looking backward? Good day, dear listeners. It's Mia again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please subscribe to my channel and like this video. And also let me know in the comments which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Mia Whitaker. At the time this began, I was 47 years old, a high school history teacher in Des Moines, Iowa. I lived in a small 2-bedroom rental, with a narrow kitchen, a back porch that leaned a little to the left, and a collection of student essays stacked higher than my coffee maker. I was not rich. I was not poor either. I was the kind of woman who knew exactly when the electric bill cleared, who bought winter coats in March when they went on clearance, and who could stretch a rotisserie chicken into 3 dinners if the week demanded it. Teaching history makes you patient in a strange way. You learn that the truth is rarely found in one dramatic moment. It is usually hidden in records, footnotes, maps, receipts, signatures, dates. Students always want history to be battles and speeches, but I tell them the real story is often in the quiet paperwork that survives. I did not know it yet, but that lesson was about to save my life. My mother, Evelyn Parker, died when I was 36. Cancer took her slowly, but family tension took parts of her before that. My older sister, Celeste, had always been the polished one. She married a financial advisor named Daniel Voss, wore linen in colors I could never keep clean, and lived in a brick house with white columns that made every visitor lower their voice. I was the practical daughter, the one who drove Mum to appointments, the one who wrote down medication schedules, the one who sat beside her bed at 2 a.m. when pain made her grip the sheets. Celeste visited, yes, but she visited like a guest. Daniel handled things. That was the phrase everyone used. Daniel handled the insurance. Daniel handled the bank calls. Daniel handled the estate. Daniel handled Mum's final bills. At the time, I was too tired to question it. Grief does not always come as tears. Sometimes it comes as exhaustion so deep that signing papers feels like walking through water. After Mum died, Daniel told me there was no meaningful estate. The house had a mortgage. Her medical bills had swallowed most of her savings. There were a few personal items, some furniture, a small account that covered funeral expenses. I remember sitting at Celeste's dining table while he explained it. He wore a navy suit, though it was a Saturday. He slid papers toward me with a silver pen. "I know this is hard," he said softly, "but your mother made things simple. She didn't want conflict. Simple." That word stayed with me. I signed where he pointed. I took the box of photographs Celeste gave me. I went home. I returned to school the following Monday because teenagers still needed to learn about Reconstruction, and because the world does not stop for a teacher's grief. For 11 years, I believed that was the end of it. Then the warning signs began. The first one was a phone call from a woman at Hawthorne Mutual Bank asking to confirm my current mailing address. I almost hung up because I thought it was a scam. She said she was reviewing old dormant instruments connected to estate disbursements. I asked what that meant. There was a pause. Then she said, A cashier's check issued in your name may have been flagged for internal reconciliation. I told her I had never had an account there. She asked if I was related to Evelyn Parker. When I said yes, the line went quiet in a different way. I'm not able to discuss details over the phone, she said. You may want to visit a branch with identification. I wrote the bank name on the back of a grocery receipt and stuck it to my refrigerator with a magnet shaped like an apple. Then life interrupted, as it always does. Finals week, a parent conference, a leaking sink. I told myself it was probably nothing. The second warning sign came 3 days later. Celeste called me. My sister almost never called without a reason polished into friendliness. Mia, she said, bright and careful. Daniel mentioned someone from a bank might contact you. Some old administrative issue with Mum's estate. Don't let it upset you. I was standing in my classroom after the last bell, erasing the words primary source from the board. How did Daniel know a bank contacted me? I asked. Another pause. Oh, I'm sure he was copied on something. He handled all of that years ago. Handled. There it was again. What kind of administrative issue? I asked. Nothing important, she said. Honestly, I'd ignore it unless they keep bothering you. These banks dig up old files and make people anxious for no reason. Teachers know silence. We use it in classrooms when a student gives half an answer and hopes we will rescue them. I gave Celeste silence. She filled it. You know Daniel would never let anything happen to you, she added. That sentence did not comfort me. It located the danger. The third warning sign came as an envelope pushed under my front door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a photocopy of a storage auction notice. Unit 41B, Prairie Lock Storage. Contents, household goods, framed photographs, filing cabinet, miscellaneous boxes. Across the top, someone had written in blue ink, "You should see this before it disappears." No signature, no explanation, just a unit number and an auction date. The date was the next morning. I did not sleep much that night. I kept looking at that paper on my kitchen table. The porch light shone through the blinds in thin white lines. My house made its usual old noises, settling around me, but I felt like I was the one being settled into place by something I could not yet see. At school, when I teach investigations, I tell students not to begin with conclusions. Begin with questions. Begin with what is known. Known, a bank had called. Known, Celeste knew too quickly. Known, someone wanted me at that auction. Known, my mother's photographs were listed in a storage unit I had never heard of. At 7 the next morning, I called in sick for the first time that semester. By 8:30, I was standing behind a chain-link fence with 17 strangers, while an auctioneer cut the lock off Unit 41B. The door rolled up with a metallic scream. Dust floated in the air. At first, it looked like nothing. A cracked dresser, a mattress wrapped in yellowing plastic, a filing cabinet with one bent drawer, cardboard boxes softened by years of heat and cold. Then I saw the plastic bin. Clear sides, blue lid, my mother's handwriting on masking tape, photos, house. My knees went weak, but I stayed standing. The bidding started at $200. A man in a baseball cap bid $3. A woman with a flashlight bid $4. I raised my number without thinking. At $800, the baseball cap man looked annoyed. At $900, he shook his head and walked away. Sold. I paid with a credit card I had promised myself I would only use for emergencies. The auction clerk gave me 48 hours to clear the unit. I walked straight to the bin. The lid was brittle. It cracked at one corner when I opened it. The smell rose first. Old paper, dust, faint lavender, the scent of my mother's linen closet. Photographs lay in loose stacks. Christmas mornings, school plays, my father before the stroke, Celeste in a prom dress, me at 12 years old, holding a ribbon from a history fair. And there, near the bottom, was a manila envelope. My name was written across it. Not in my mother's handwriting, in Daniel's. I knew because Daniel wrote like a machine, square and controlled, every capital letter the same height. Inside the envelope was the photograph of my mother, by the porch swing. Behind it was the check. Hawthorne Mutual Bank. Pay to the order of Mia Whitaker, $412,000. Memo line, distribution per E. Parker Trust. Authorized signature, Daniel R. Voss, trustee. The paper trembled in my hand. Not because I was greedy, because I understood documents. A check is not just money. It is a record of intent. It says someone was supposed to receive something. It says a decision was made, documented, approved. And this one said my mother had tried to give me a future. Someone had taken it and hidden it behind her smile. I put the check back in the envelope. I did not call Celeste. I did not call Daniel. I did not even call the bank again. I closed the bin, locked my car, and sat behind the steering wheel, with both hands flat against my skirt. Fear is strange. It does not always make you small. Sometimes it makes you precise. I drove home using side streets, checking my mirrors more than usual. I carried the envelope inside like it was glass. Then I cleared my kitchen table. Every teacher has a method for chaos. Mine was piles. Photographs in one pile. Legal papers in another. Anything with dates in another. Anything with Daniel's name in another. By midnight, my kitchen looked like a small archive. I found copies of property tax bills for my mother's old house. Bank statements addressed not to Evelyn Parker, but to Parker Family Trust, a letter from a law office I had never heard of, a sticky note, with Daniel's handwriting, Mia not to be contacted until final clearance. Final clearance of what? I found an inventory list that mentioned my mother's house, a life insurance payout, a savings account, and something labeled mineral rights. That made no sense. My mother had lived in a modest old house on the east side of Des Moines. We did not own oil fields. We owned a cracked driveway and a maple tree that dropped branches every storm. At 2 a.m, I made coffee I did not need and sat with my laptop. County records are not romantic, but they are honest if you know how to read them. I searched my mother's name, then the trust name, then Daniel's. That was when I found the first public record. 3 months after my mother died, her house had not been sold to pay medical bills as Daniel claimed. It had been transferred into a company called Northline Residential Holdings. The registered agent was Daniel's former law partner. The sale price listed was $1. I stared at that screen until the numbers blurred. $1. My mother's house, the porch swing, the kitchen where she taught me to make biscuits. The hallway where I measured my height in pencil marks, transferred for $1. That was the first night I truly became afraid. Not because of what Daniel had stolen, because of how calmly he had done it. The next morning, I did what I teach my students to do when the evidence gets bigger than their emotions. I asked for help from someone trained to read the battlefield. Her name was Marisol Grant. She was a probate attorney with a small office above a bakery downtown. I found her through a retired teacher who had fought a messy estate case after her husband died. Marisol did not have Daniel's polish. Her office had mismatched chairs, a printer that hummed like an old refrigerator, and a wall of framed degrees slightly crooked. But when she looked at the check, her face changed. Not dramatically, professionally. She put on reading glasses and said, "Tell me exactly where you found this." I told her everything. The bank call, Celeste's warning, the anonymous auction notice, the storage unit, the envelope, the trust documents, the $1 property transfer. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she leaned back. "Mia," she said, "do not contact your sister. Do not contact Daniel. Do not deposit this check. Do not ask the bank casual questions. From this moment forward, you document everything, and you communicate through counsel." "Is the check still valid?" I asked. "Maybe, maybe not. That is not the most important question." "It isn't?" "No," she said. "The important question is why a trustee issued a distribution check to you, then apparently prevented you from receiving it." I sat there with my hands folded in my lap like a student in the principal's office. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we may be looking at breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, conversion of trust assets, and possibly elder financial exploitation depending on the timeline." The words sounded heavy. Legal words always do. They are like furniture in a dark room. You feel their edges before you can see their shape. Marisol made 3 copies of the check. She placed the original in a clear sleeve. She asked me to write a timeline by hand while memory was fresh. Names, dates, conversations. Exact words if possible. Then she said something I never forgot. People like Daniel rely on emotional exhaustion. They count on relatives being too embarrassed, too grieving, or too intimidated to ask for records. We are going to ask for records. That afternoon, I returned to the storage unit with my friend Lorraine, our school librarian, who had the calm temperament of a woman who could find a missing footnote in a hurricane. We wore gloves. We took pictures before moving anything. We numbered boxes. We made an inventory. In the bent filing cabinet, behind old appliance manuals, we found a locked metal cash box. Lorraine looked at me. "Do you want to open it here?" I shook my head. "No, we photograph it first." She smiled sadly. "You really are a history teacher." "No," I said. "Today I'm evidence." Inside the cash box were 3 flash drives, a notary stamp receipt, old bank statements, and a small spiral notebook with my mother's handwriting. That was the moment the story changed again. Because until then, I thought my mother had trusted Daniel completely. But the notebook told a different story. The first pages were ordinary: medication schedules, grocery lists, names of nurses. Then the tone shifted. Daniel asked me to sign again today, said it was for convenience. Celeste says I worry too much. Need Mia here, but Daniel says no need to upset her. Asked about house value. Daniel changed subject. I had to stop reading. My mother had known something was wrong. She had tried to write it down. On the last page, dated 6 weeks before she died, she wrote, "If Mia asks, tell her blue room, back wall." Blue room. The old house had a blue room. My childhood bedroom. Back wall. I closed the notebook and felt the air leave my lungs. The house that had been transferred for $1 was no longer in the family. According to county records, it had been renovated and sold twice. The current owner was a young couple with a baby, strangers who had nothing to do with any of this. Still, I drove there. I parked across the street in late afternoon light. The maple tree was gone. The porch swing was gone. The house was grey now, with black shutters and a new mailbox. For a moment, grief rose so sharply I had to grip the steering wheel. Not all theft is financial. Some people steal the places where your memories were supposed to rest. I did not knock. I did not disturb the family inside. I took one photograph from my car, wrote down the address, and sent it to Marisol. Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Do not go back alone. We will handle property history formally." That night Daniel called. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered and put it on speaker. My recorder was already running, because Marisol had told me Iowa law allowed one-party consent, but to confirm before relying on anything. She had confirmed. "Mia," Daniel said warmly, "Celeste tells me you've been digging through old family things." Digging, like I was dirty for looking. "I found some documents," I said. "I assumed you might. That storage unit was a mistake. Old files get misplaced. I'm happy to take them off your hands and sort out anything sensitive." His voice was smooth, almost kind. "I have an attorney now," I said. The silence afterward was small but complete. Then he laughed softly. "An attorney? Mia, that seems unnecessary. This is family." "I agree," I said. "That's why it's unfortunate." His tone cooled by half a degree. "You should be careful. Estate documents can be confusing when taken out of context. Your mother was very ill. She signed many things. You wouldn't want to misinterpret her wishes." There it was. The first pressure. Not a threat. A concern shaped like a knife. "I'll let my attorney speak with you," I said. "Mia," he said, and now the warmth was gone. "Your sister is fragile. Dragging up old misunderstandings will hurt her." I looked at my mother's notebook on the table. "I'm sorry she'll be hurt," I said. Then I hung up. My hands shook afterward, but I wrote everything down. Time of call, duration, exact phrases, tone. I told my students that same week that history is not what people say happened. History is what the evidence can bear. I was beginning to understand how much weight truth could carry. Within 2 weeks, Marisol had filed formal requests: bank records, trust documents, closing statements, trustee correspondence, tax filings. The first responses were slow, incomplete, and wrapped in objections. Daniel had hired a large firm. That told us something. Men who have nothing to hide do not usually pay expensive lawyers to hide it elegantly. Then Hawthorne Mutual produced a record that made Marisol call me at 7:15 in the morning. "Mia," she said, "sit down." I was in my classroom, alone, before first period. Sunlight was just touching the desks. "The check was never cashed," she said. "It was issued, logged, then marked as delivered by hand to the trustee for distribution." "To Daniel." "Yes. So he had it." "Yes. And he put it in storage." "That appears to be one possibility," she said carefully. "But there's more. The trust account had far more than $412,000. I sat down. How much more? At its highest point, just over $1.8 million. The school hallway outside my room filled with teenage voices, lockers slamming, shoes squeaking on tile. Ordinary life passing by the door while mine split open. "That's impossible," I whispered. "It came from 3 sources," Marisol said. "Life insurance, sale of investment assets, and royalties connected to land your mother inherited from her father in North Dakota. Mineral rights." The strange phrase from the inventory list. My grandfather had owned farmland near Williston. I remembered visiting once as a child, wind bending the grass flat, my mother saying the land was more trouble than it was worth. Apparently, after shale drilling expanded, it had become worth quite a lot. My mother had known. Daniel had known. I had not. The next piece of evidence came from a retired notary named Mrs. Kaplan, whose name appeared on several trust amendments. Marisol found her in Arizona, living near her daughter. At first, Mrs. Kaplan did not want to talk. Then Marisol sent copies of the documents. Mrs. Kaplan called back the next day. She said the signature on one amendment was hers, but the date was wrong. She had retired 2 months before that document was supposedly notarized. The notary stamp had been expired. The amendment was likely forged. That amendment was the one that gave Daniel expanded authority and reduced my rights to discretionary distribution, subject to trustee judgment. In plain language, it allowed him to decide whether I deserved what my mother left me. I thought of every classroom rubric I had ever made. Students deserve clear standards, fair grading, evidence, not one person's secret judgment. Daniel had made himself the teacher, the test, and the answer key. The point of no return came on a rainy Thursday in October. Marisol's forensic accountant, a quiet man named Peter Shue, found payments from the trust to Northline Residential Holdings. Consulting fees, management fees, property preparation fees, legal coordination fees, all vague, all large, all connected to Daniel. Over 11 years, more than $900,000 had moved through entities he controlled. When Peter explained it, he did not sound dramatic. Accountants rarely do. He simply placed a chart in front of me. "Money leaves the trust here," he said, pointing. "It enters this company. Then part of it returns to Mr. Voss through salary, partner distributions, or repayment of loans." So he paid himself with my mother's estate. That is the pattern. The truth has a weight of its own. I felt it settle on me. Not rage, not yet. Something steadier. A refusal. That evening, Celeste came to my house. She did not call first. She arrived in a cream-colored coat, holding an umbrella, though the rain had stopped. Her makeup was perfect. Her eyes were red. I opened the door, but did not invite her in. "Mia," she said, "this has gone too far." The porch light hummed above us. "What has?" I asked. Accusing Daniel, hiring lawyers, digging up Mum's past like she was some confused old woman. I looked at my sister and saw the girl who once braided my hair before school. I also saw a woman who had chosen comfort over truth, so many times that she could no longer tell the difference. "I found Mum's notebook," I said. Her face changed. "Only for a second. But teachers notice the second before a student lies." "What notebook?" "The one where she wrote that Daniel was pressuring her." Celeste looked away toward the wet street. "She was sick, Mia." "Yes," I said. "She was sick. That made her vulnerable, not unreliable. Her mouth tightened. Daniel says your attorney is trying to turn you against us for money. My attorney didn't hide a check in a storage unit. Celeste flinched. Then she lowered her voice. He made a mistake. There it was. Not he didn't do it. Not you're wrong. He made a mistake. How long have you known? I asked. She began to cry then, softly, carefully, the way people cry when they still hope tears will do the work truth cannot. I didn't understand all of it. That wasn't my question. She wiped her cheek. Daniel said Mum changed things because you were unstable after the divorce. I almost laughed. My divorce had been quiet, sad and final. I missed 2 days of school and then returned to teaching the Civil War. Mum died 3 years before my divorce, I said. Celeste said nothing. That was when I understood. The lies had not only been told to me, they had been arranged around me, year after year, until even facts with dates could be made to look uncertain if the right person said them in the right room. I need you to leave, I said. Mia, please. He can settle this privately. He said he can get you money, a lot of money. But if you keep pushing, everything becomes public. His firm, our children, our name. Our mother, I said, had a name too. She stared at me. I did not raise my voice. I did not slam the door. I simply said, all future communication goes through my lawyer. Then I closed the door gently. That night I cried for the first time. Not for the money, for the years. For the dinners where they let me bring potato salad and sit at their table knowing what they had done. For the Christmas cards. For Daniel's hand on my shoulder at the funeral. For Celeste saying, Mum wanted things simple, while wearing our mother's pearl earrings. Legal battles do not look like they do in movies. There was no sudden courtroom confession, no judge banging a gavel while everyone gasped. Real justice moved through emails, subpoenas, motions, affidavits, bank certifications, deposition notices, and long afternoons where I sat in conference rooms, drinking stale coffee, while lawyers discussed my mother's life in numbered exhibits. Marisol filed a civil complaint, alleging breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, conversion, unjust enrichment, and concealment. She also petitioned the probate court to reopen matters connected to the trust administration. Daniel's side denied everything. They said records were misunderstood. They said my mother was competent and fully informed. They said the check had been misplaced during an office transition. They said I had waited too long. That last one hurt more than I expected. As if ignorance were consent. As if a hidden door becomes legal because no one finds it quickly enough. The deposition was held in a glass-walled conference room on the 19th floor of a downtown building. Daniel arrived with 2 attorneys. He wore charcoal grey and a blue tie. He looked rested. I sat beside Marisol, my legal pad in front of me, though she told me I would not need to speak. Daniel took the oath. At first, he performed beautifully. Yes, he had assisted Evelyn Parker. Yes, he had served as trustee. Yes, he cared deeply for the family. No, he had never intended to deprive me of anything. No, he did not remember the specific check. No, he could not say how it ended up in storage. His voice was calm, respectful, almost wounded. Then Marisol began laying documents in front of him one by one. Exhibit 12, the cashier's check log. Exhibit 13, Daniel's signature accepting hand delivery. Exhibit 14, the storage lease agreement. He leaned forward. I don't recognize that. Marisol adjusted her glasses. It is signed by Dr. Voss. I may have arranged storage for family materials. Under the name Northline Residential? I don't recall. Your company paid the rental fees for 7 years. His attorney objected. Marisol waited. Daniel's jaw shifted. I would need to review the records. You have had them for 6 weeks, she said. I looked down at my hands so no one would see my face. Then came the notebook. Daniel's attorney objected again. Foundation, authentication, relevance. Marisol had prepared for that. She had my mother's medical records, samples of her handwriting, and testimony from her hospice nurse, who remembered Evelyn writing notes because medication made long conversations difficult. Daniel looked at the page. Need Mia here, but Daniel says no need to upset her. For the first time, his polish cracked. Just slightly. That could refer to anything, he said. Marisol nodded. Of course. Let's discuss the trust amendment notarized on June 14. He relaxed too soon. That was his first mistake in that room. Marisol placed Mrs. Kaplan's sworn affidavit before him. The notary states she did not notarize this document, had retired before the date listed, and that her stamp was no longer valid. Can you explain that? Daniel read the page. He read it longer than necessary. His lawyer whispered something. Daniel said, I relied on staff for document processing. Which staff member? I don't recall. Was it the same staff member who delivered the $412,000 check to Ms. Whitaker? I said I don't recall the check. Marisol's voice stayed mild. Then let's look at your email. That was the moment the room changed. Through discovery, Daniel's former assistant had produced archived emails after receiving a subpoena. One email from Daniel to the assistant read, Hold Mia distribution. Celeste not ready for disruption. Keep check with Parker files until further decision. Further decision. My mother had already decided. The trust had decided. The bank had issued the check. Daniel had decided he knew better. Another email discussed the house transfer. Need clean movement before Medicaid review questions. Use North Line. Keep family explanations simple. Simple. There was that word again, now stripped of its softness. By the time the deposition ended, Daniel no longer looked rested. He looked older, though not sorry. That distinction matters. Some people regret harm. Others regret exposure. The probate judge ordered a full accounting. The civil case moved toward trial, but after the deposition and the notary affidavit, Daniel's firm began distancing itself. A regulatory complaint followed. Then a criminal investigation opened into forged notarization and misappropriation of trust assets. Celeste called me once more. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. I hope you're happy, she said. You're destroying everything. I saved it and sent it to Marisol. Not because I wanted to use it, because documentation had become my shelter. Months passed. Winter came. My students complained about primary source analysis, and I smiled because they had no idea how much of my life now depended on primary sources. Then, in March, we reached a settlement in the civil case, approved alongside probate court orders. Daniel was removed as trustee. A professional fiduciary was appointed. The court recognized that my distribution had been wrongfully withheld and ordered recovery of traceable assets where possible. The original check could not simply be deposited after all those years, but the obligation behind it had not vanished. With interest, recovered funds, and settlement proceeds, I received more than the amount on the check. Not everything was recovered. That is another thing real stories teach you. Justice is not a magic eraser. Some money had been spent. Some assets were tangled. Some wounds were beyond accounting. But Daniel lost his license to advise clients. His firm removed his name from its materials. The criminal matter continued quietly, and later I learned he accepted a plea involving financial misconduct and forged documentation. He avoided the dramatic prison sentence people in comment sections always imagine, but he did not avoid consequence. He lost the thing he loved most. The image of being untouchable. Celeste and I did not reconcile right away. Maybe we never will completely. She sent a letter 6 months after the settlement. Not an excuse, not a full confession, but a beginning. She wrote that she had let Daniel explain the world to her because it was easier than looking at it herself. I understood that more than I wanted to. Still, understanding is not the same as permission. I wrote back 3 sentences. I hope you heal. I am healing too. For now, distance is part of that healing. With the money, I did not buy a mansion. I did not buy a red sports car. I did not quit teaching in triumph and walk out while students applauded. Life is quieter than that, when you have finally survived something. I bought a small brick house 15 minutes from school, with a deep porch and a backyard that caught morning sun. The first thing I planted was lavender, because my mother's linen closet had smelled that way. Then tomatoes, then rosemary, then a maple tree, small enough that I could carry it myself from the nursery. I paid off my debts. I started a scholarship fund at my school for students who had lost a parent or guardian. Not huge, not flashy, but real. Enough to pay for books, application fees, bus passes, the small expenses that can decide whether a young person keeps going. I traveled once, alone, to North Dakota. I stood near the land my grandfather had owned, wind pressing my coat against my legs, and I thought about all the quiet inheritances women lose because someone calls them difficult for asking questions. I brought home a smooth stone from the roadside. It sits on my desk now beside a framed photograph of my mother. The photograph from the storage unit. The one that hid the check. Sometimes my students ask why I care so much about citations, records, and evidence. They think I am just being strict. I tell them evidence protects people. It protects the dead from being misquoted. It protects the living from being manipulated. It protects the truth from those who smile while burying it. I was not brave. I was careful. I did not win because I shouted louder than Daniel. I won because I kept the paper. I made the timeline. I found the records. I listened to the right lawyer. I waited when I wanted to confront. I documented when I wanted to scream. Money was not the real inheritance. The real inheritance was my mother's final lesson. If something feels wrong, write it down. If someone pressures you to stay confused, slow down. If a powerful person tells you not to ask questions, that is usually the first question you should ask. That $900 storage unit did not make me rich. It gave me back the part of myself that had been taught to accept less than the truth. And when I sit on my porch now, watching the maple leaves move in the evening light, I understand something I wish every woman could know sooner. Peace is not what remains after people stop hurting you. Peace is what you build when you finally stop helping them hide it. So tell me, dear listeners, what would you have done if you found that check hidden behind an old family photograph? Would you have confronted them immediately, or would you have stayed quiet and gathered evidence first? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story stayed with you, please like, subscribe, and pass it along to someone who needs to remember that the truth may be buried, but it is not dead.